I didn't forgive his first affair because I was weak. I forgave it because I thought love meant endurance. Because I believed marriages weren't supposed to be easy. Because everyone around me said the same thing. It was just a mistake. He came back, didn't he? People mess up once. So I swallowed my pride. I swallowed my anger. And I swallowed the quiet voice inside me that said, "This changes everything." We had been married 7 years when it happened. No screaming fights. No obvious cracks. Just routine. Comfort. The kind of life people call stable. When I found the messages, they weren't dramatic. No love poems. No promises of forever. Just familiarity. Inside jokes. Late-night check-ins. Casual affection that didn't belong to me anymore. I confronted him that night. I remember how calm he looked. Not defensive. Not angry. Relieved. Like he'd been waiting to be caught. He cried. He apologized. He blamed stress. Work. Distance. The usual list. And then he said the sentence that convinced me to stay. It didn't mean anything. So I chose forgiveness. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I wanted to believe that pain could be temporary. The months after were strange. On the surface, he became the perfect husband. More attentive. More present. More affectionate. He'd bring home flowers on random Tuesdays. He'd text me during the day just to ask how I was feeling. Everyone said it was proof that forgiveness worked. What they didn't see was the cost. I started tracking his moods. Reading his silences. Watching his phone light up from the corner of my eye. Trust didn't come back. It just learned how to hide. Still, I told myself this was what rebuilding looked like. That scars were normal. That love after betrayal was supposed to feel fragile. I thought surviving the first affair made us stronger. What it actually did was teach him something dangerous. That I would stay. 2 years later, the second affair didn't announce itself with messages. It showed up in behavior. Sudden gym sessions. New clothes. A password added to his phone, not changed, just added. When I asked about it, he laughed. "You're being paranoid." And I almost believed him. Because I had already forgiven him once. Because I didn't want to be the woman who was still stuck on the past. Because doubt feels selfish when you've promised to move on. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't scared anymore. I was tired. So one afternoon, when his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter and he was in the shower, I didn't hesitate. I didn't shake. I didn't cry. I unlocked the phone and scrolled. This time, it wasn't casual. It was intentional. Plans. Hotels. Complaints about me. "She doesn't really understand me. I feel more alive with you." That was the moment it clicked. The first affair wasn't a mistake. It was a test. And I had passed it by staying. When I confronted him the second time, he didn't cry. He sighed. Like I'd interrupted something. He said he loved me. He said he didn't want to lose me. He said he never meant for it to happen again. But he didn't say he was sorry. And that told me everything. I realized something standing there in our kitchen, phone in my hand, heart strangely calm. I wasn't heartbroken. I was free. Because the illusion was gone. I saw our marriage clearly for the first time, not as a partnership, but as a place where my forgiveness had become permission. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I didn't ask questions I already knew the answers to. I told him I was done. He didn't believe me at first. He said I was emotional. That we could go to counseling again. That everyone deserves a second chance. I looked at him and said quietly, "You already had it." Leaving wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. Boxes. Paperwork. A strange sense of relief I didn't expect. The hardest part wasn't losing him. It was forgiving myself for staying the first time. But here's what I learned, and what no one tells you. Forgiveness doesn't heal a relationship if respect is already gone. Love doesn't grow where accountability never lives. And staying after betrayal doesn't make you noble, it makes you predictable. The second affair didn't break my heart. It gave me clarity. And I walked away knowing something I wish I'd understood sooner. You can forgive someone and still refuse to stay where you are no longer valued. I thought leaving would be the end of the story. It wasn't. It was the part no one prepares you for, the quiet aftermath, when there's no villain in the room anymore, no confrontation left to replay, and no one to blame for the silence except yourself. The first weeks after I moved out felt unreal. I stayed with a friend at first, sleeping on a mattress on the floor, surrounded by boxes labeled with my handwriting. Kitchen, clothes, books, life. During the day, I functioned. I went to work. I answered emails. I smiled when people asked how I was doing. At night, everything slowed down. There was no phone buzzing. No footsteps in the hallway. No subtle tension humming under the surface. Just stillness. And that's when the doubt tried to creep in. I caught myself replaying memories I hadn't touched in years. Vacations. Inside jokes. The version of him that existed before betrayal rewrote everything. My brain tried to bargain. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe everyone cheats sometimes. Maybe I expected too much. That's the dangerous part of leaving, not missing the person, but missing the version of yourself that believed things could go back to how they were. He texted me a week after I left. Just one message. I miss you. No apology. No accountability. No acknowledgement of what he'd done. Just absence framed as affection. I didn't reply. That's when the messages escalated. Long paragraphs. Promises of therapy. Claims of change. Accusations disguised as concern. You're throwing away years. You're not perfect either. You'll regret this. I realized something reading those messages. He wasn't fighting for me. He was fighting for the version of life where I stayed quiet and forgiving. And for the first time, that version no longer existed. The divorce process was slow and unglamorous. Paperwork. Waiting. Conversations reduced to logistics. We spoke through lawyers most of the time. When we did talk directly, it felt like speaking to a stranger who knew all my habits but none of my boundaries. What surprised me wasn't his anger. It was his confusion. He genuinely couldn't understand why the second affair was different. You forgave me before, he said once, frustration slipping through his calm voice. What changed? I answered honestly. I did. And I meant it. I had forgiven him. What changed was that I stopped forgiving myself for being disrespected. That answer ended the conversation. As the legal process dragged on, something else started happening. I began to notice myself again. Not the wife version. Not the forgiving version. Just me. I realized how many small choices I had been deferring for years. What to eat. What to watch. How to spend my weekends. When you live with someone who constantly crosses lines, you learn to make yourself smaller without noticing. Living alone felt strange at first. Too much space. Too much choice. Then it felt powerful. I bought furniture he would have hated. Painted walls colors he would have mocked. Left dishes in the sink without anxiety. I slept better than I had in years. One afternoon, while unpacking a box labeled books, I found an old journal from before we were married. I didn't remember writing most of it. Page after page, I talked about dreams I had set aside. Places I wanted to go. The kind of love I believed in. I sat on the floor and cried not because I'd lost him, but because I'd lost her. And then I felt something unexpected. Anger. Not the explosive kind. The focused kind. Anger at how easily I'd accepted less. Anger at how forgiveness had been used against me. Anger at the way women are taught that endurance is virtue. That anger didn't consume me. It clarified me. Friends started inviting me out again. Dinners. Walks. Coffee dates that weren't dates. At first, I said no. I wasn't ready. Then one night, I said yes. Not because I felt healed, but because I was curious. Sitting across from people who didn't know my marriage, who didn't see me as the forgiving wife or the woman who stayed, was refreshing. I wasn't explaining myself anymore. I was just present. Eventually, someone asked if I'd ever date again. The question used to terrify me. Now it just felt neutral. I didn't rush into anything. I didn't download apps or chase distractions. I did something radical instead. I stayed single. Not as punishment. Not as fear. As practice. I practiced listening to myself. Practiced saying no without guilt. Practiced recognizing red flags without rationalizing them away. And that's when I understood the real damage of the first affair. It wasn't the cheating. It was how it trained me to doubt my instincts. Every boundary I ignored back then came back as a lesson now. I learned to trust discomfort. To ask hard questions. To walk away early. Months later, I ran into him unexpectedly at a grocery store. I barely recognized him. He looked the same, but smaller somehow. Less certain. We exchanged polite words. Nothing heavy. As I turned to leave, he said, "You seem different." I smiled. "I am." He hesitated, then said quietly, "I didn't think you'd actually leave." And there it was. The truth he'd never admitted. I nodded once. "I know." And I walked away without shaking. That moment stayed with me not as revenge, but as confirmation. Leaving wasn't impulsive. It was overdue. I eventually did date again. Carefully. Slowly. The first time someone respected a boundary without questioning it, I almost cried. The first time someone apologized without being asked, it stunned me. Healthy love felt unfamiliar at first. Quiet. Consistent. Uncomplicated. No chaos. No guessing. And that's when it hit me. I had confused intensity with intimacy. Drama with depth. Endurance with love. The second affair didn't teach me I shouldn't forgive. It taught me forgiveness without change is self-abandonment. I don't regret loving him. I don't regret trying. What I regret is how long I stayed after the lesson was clear. If you're listening to this and you're standing at the edge of the same decision, here's the truth no one told me. You don't leave because you stop loving them. You leave because you finally start loving yourself enough to stop accepting less. The first betrayal broke my trust. The second one gave me my life back. And I never needed a third to prove it.